Welcome to Commander Central, episode 146, and today we're going to be looking at Patreon supporter Adam Schultz's Omnath Locus the Roil deck. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Chris is here for a deck tech.
I am. Now that we're recording them back-to-back shows, I can make them.
Traditionally, the last, I don't know how many months.
6 months.
We record on Thursdays for the Monday show, and then Max and I were recording Sunday nights for the deck tech, which was tough for Chris to make.
Originally, it was going to work, and then your D&D night switched.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to try to do these on Sunday nights moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future. On Thursday nights after the regular show. And if Chris has time, he'll be here for these hopefully too. And if he can't, he can't. We'll deal with it.
So anyone that I know personally, I will not be here.
When it comes time to do,
you guys know who you are.
That seems reasonable. So we might as well jump right into this deck, eh?
Sure.
I'm ready for it. So this is from listener Adam Schultz. It's an Omnath Locus the Roil deck, so it's a new commander, and we got some notes here from him. His meta at the shop has a wide variation of power levels, most of the time consisting of himself and 2 of his friends who are relatively new to the game. There's a wide variety of decks in the meta, but most of the time there's always a Zendru, Mareth, or Shattergang Brothers, or a Saheeli Precon deck there. He would say his power level typically varies from 6 to 8. So far, this deck doesn't have a really focused goal outside of playing elementals and landfall effects to make more elementals. And the only real combo he has found in the deck is Omnath, Locus of Rage, and Ultra Dementia, along with some kind of way to make more elementals.
Yeah, the weaknesses that he's seen so far with the deck is, after playing it a few times, is it seems to move really slowly when I can't get all the landfall triggers to go off or draw cards off of Omnath's ability. Also, the not having a real clear win condition is a huge problem, mainly looking for a way to win with a bunch of elementals on the field and run over my opponents with sheer numbers and power. For budget restrictions, pretty much a single card upgrade should be less than $40.
And we'll have some minor discrepancies here in the cards we recommend because I read that as $40 total. So
went budget.
We're doing double duty. We're providing the more expensive Cadillac options as well as the budgetary options, and we'll just pretend that was all intentional and not just that I can't read. Omnath, Locus of the Roil. 1 and a Teamworse, or 4 mana total for a legendary creature elemental. When Omnath, Locus of the Roil enters the battlefield, it deals damage to any target equal to the number of elementals you control. And whenever a land enters a battlefield under your control, put a +1 counter on target elemental you control. If you control 8 or more lands, draw a card. And he's a 3/3. Omnath. And we're going back to Zendikar in
a year.
It's like January, I think.
It's the fall set.
Is it the fall set? Oh, that's right.
So we go back to Theros first.
Theros is January, then the new set.
That's right.
And then...
Which I heard that Elspeth will be in. I'm so excited!
Yeah, we got some art from her this week. All right, we're already straying off topic.
How did I miss that? I'm sorry, I've been playing Borderlands for like 4 straight weeks.
I don't think it was intentional. I think it was like something from marketing that leaked.
Granted, she's been on every GP promo, like those big posters at GPs.
Well, there was people that were mad about it, and I was like, the face character of the last Theros set who died in a cliffhanger and went to the underworld, and now we're
going to ignore that.
Now we're in a set in Theros taking place in the underworld, and you're shocked that Elspeth might be in the set. You really shouldn't be surprised at that.
You should be shocked
anyway.
If
Johnny's
going to be
wasn't there, you'd be surprised. So anyway, let's look at this deck. Omnath is pretty new. That was from the core set this summer. This deck has an average CMC of 3.58, and most of the cards are clustered around the 3-drop slot by a significant margin. There's I think 22 or 23 3-drops, and then we're looking at 10-ish 2 and 4s. So there's a lot of stuff there. That might be nice to kind of clean that up a little bit. First things first, this is a landfall-ish deck. Let's look at the Landbase, Max.
There's 38 of them.
There's 38. That seems not like a crazy amount in a deck that is pulling a lot of lands out.
It's also 3 colors.
It's a 3-color deck too.
So let's go through them.
This will be easy.
Yeah, we have Cavern of Souls, Command Tower, Frontier Bivouac, a Terrain Generator, and then we have 15 forests, 9 islands, and 10 mountains.
Well, that was simple. That's a lot of basic lands.
Cool, I'm done. See everybody next week.
So
Don't got to worry about that Blood Moon.
yeah, I guess you're fine. I mean, look, you could put Blood Moon in this deck if you wanted, and you would probably be okay. You definitely
I'm
be
down
okay.
for it.
Might not want to do that to your friends. You can also run back to basics in this deck pretty easily and not have any problems.
You gotta learn by touching the burner.
You could run Ruination in this deck and not have a lot of problems.
Chocolate hops.
Anyway, right. Well, I guess that doesn't care if you have basics right. It just kills your lands. But you could do that if you wanted to go that route. I'm not going to recommend it.
No.
So any changes here, do you guys think? I do think you want a lot of basics in this deck.
I do and I don't. It depends on what type of ramp you want to run.
Sure. I don't think you maybe want that many basics.
No, I think if you run the 3 shocks and the 3 check lands,
You're good.
you should be good because
Yeah.
it gives you 6 duels overall.
And what? There's 2 Battle for Zendikar lands in these color combinations? Or just
Yes.
one?
Two.
Two.
And
Okay.
so
Green,
you have a
white,
couple of different
and-
ones.
Green,
Or
red, and
Green, red, and blue. No, there's
No,
only
just
one.
one.
Just
So the
one.
green, red one.
it's the
Yep.
enemy.
For some reason, I'm thinking we're in like
allied.
double ally colors right now.
So you could also run the cycling land if you
Yep.
wanted to. The cycling fetchable duel too.
So there's what now? 6, 7 duels that are fetchables.
Yep. I think that's a reasonable swap to make.
Yeah.
You could pull a few out. I would also pull Frontier Bivouac out.
Blasphemy.
It comes
have-
by tapped though.
I even play the 3 color one in my Alessia deck.
Do you?
Yeah.
And I have a beautiful mana in there, but I'm just like, no, it's foil. It goes in here.
Okay, that's-
It sets up the mana perfectly though, because even if you draw this on turn 1 and play this, you are set on every color of mana for the rest of the game.
I mean, the amount of times that it hurts you is probably pretty limited. I still would feel like I could just run a City of Brass and always have the mana
So you should
and
play
always have it
those too,
available.
but-
Right. Well, yeah, that's true. Or an Exotic Orchard or something.
Yes.
I don't think you necessarily need that, but I don't think it's terrible. The one thing I would add here is Ghost Town.
Yep.
It's an older land that lets you bounce it to your hand for 0 mana on someone else's turn, and it's just a way to guarantee you get landfall triggers if you want to.
The one that I would definitely put in this deck, seeing how reading Omnath's ability, is I would play Field of the Dead.
Oh, that
yeah.
was one of mine on my list. And actually, we have a wet Omnath deck in our shop.
We do. Yep.
And I've looked at some of these lists online. People actually tend to run a mix of non-snow covered basics and snow covered basics because it does trigger Field of the Dead because of the name change.
Oh, sure.
So maybe that's worth grabbing if your local shop has some Modern Horizons packs laying around.
Or even the snow coverage from Modern Horizons are really cheap.
Yeah,
right
they're
now.
they're like
Yeah.
$1 or less.
The other reason I want to suggest Shocklands is because they are in standard and
Shocks
they're
are
all
also relatively cheap right now.
relatively cheap before rotation happens.
That makes sense.
The few I would probably recommend on top of Field of the Dead would be Kessig Wolf Run, just because Omnath does have the potential to get really big in this deck.
And it can be a kill condition.
And it can be
Give it some reach.
Give it some trample and some extra power and get through.
Yeah.
But that's really all I got.
Yeah, because I do get why he wants to have a bunch of basics in here. I wouldn't tweak it too much. Like if this was some other commander, I'd be like, well, just run
Run all of them.
run 12 basics and then jam it with duels to make it as smooth as possible. But
Yeah, I mean,
get
still, let's say that
12
we
basics,
take out.
that's pretty high on your scale, Dana.
let's say that we take out 12 lands and put them in for non-basics. That still leaves you with, what is that? So 2, 10, 9, 21
it. Yeah, that's still a good amount of basics
basics,
in the
which is
3-color
still
deck.
really good.
Yeah, Max, you're right. I am at 6 basic lands in my 3-color crash deck.
What? Please tell me it's 2 of each and not
It is
just
2
like
of-
1,
it
1,
is
and
2
4.
It is 2 of each. I have 2 of each in my crash deck.
I'm putting a Blood Moon in Mogus. The rate that I've been watching people play, I'm not even going to feel bad. I'm just going to be like, you brought your own doom upon you.
Yeah, that's absolutely something I'm greedy with for sure.
And it's going to be the day I sit down with Dana and he's like, we flip our commanders. He's like, Reki. And I'm like, oh no.
I've made a terrible mistake.
I just scoop.
All right, how about instants here? There's only 4 in this deck. And they are Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi, which, for those who don't remember, was in, I believe that was Dominaria. Excuse me, no, that was in the first Ravnica Allegiance.
Yes.
set. Put 9 +1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a legendary 0/0 elemental creature with haste named Vitu-Ghazi, and it is still a land.
Oof.
Instant speed's really nice on that, too. It's got some elemental synergy here. Turns one of your lands into creatures, and this is a deck that ramps a lot. So I think that's a good spell. Beast Within, great removal. Harrow is a nice way to get some ramp going as well at instant speed. And Teamer Charm, and I'll read those 3 modes because it's been a while. Choose target creature. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and it fights target creature you don't control. Counter target spell unless the controller pays 3, and creatures with power 3 or less can't block this turn.
I think that's really good for these colors.
Man, I think it's good. That's the one spell I'm not sure if it's good enough.
And I feel that way about Awakening of the Vichugasi.
Okay. You don't have a way to abuse it, really, or anything here?
Well, and the fact that it doesn't... The land becomes an elemental versus when a... I don't know.
You don't get an ETB trigger often?
Right. And I get it. It makes a land a 6/6, which is cool. You can beat face with it, but
Sure.
I don't think it synergizes that well, except for the fact that it says elemental.
I think if I wanted a card named after a Temur in this deck, it might be a Temur Ascendancy. Just to give all your stuff haste and get a little bit of extra, maybe get some card draw out of playing some of those big beater elementals in here, including your commander. So that's one I would be very tempted to run. But
I mean, we talked about these on Monday's show, those one-drop removal spells. I mean, Rapid Hybridization is one of them. You know, that could easily be in here, just another Beast Within.
I mean, Chaos Warp hits any target at all at 3 mana.
Reality Shift.
Reality Shift is great. I don't know how. I don't know if you want too many. He does have a couple enchantment removal spells later on. We'll get into. I don't think you need to add 6 or 7 different things. But I feel like Temur Charm doesn't quite do enough, and I would run maybe Chaos Warp in that slot or something else that's a little more consistent.
So I came up with a off the wall one to follow both of.
Oh Lord.
His themes, I guess. So this is a landfall type-ish deck, and he's missing a little bit of card draw. There's a wonderful card called Growth Spiral, which is a 2-mana instant.
Yeah.
Draw a card, you may play an additional land this turn, or play a land from your hand. So you can do it at any point in time to trigger your landfalls, do whatever else. For 2 mana. So, I mean, it's easy cantrip spell and allows you to play a land.
Do it on your opponent's turn.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, that's not a bad call. All right, well, we just touched on enchantments, so let's drop down there and look at those really quick.
We got 9 of them.
Yeah.
So we have Bounty of Luxa, and I'll read that because that is kind of old. It's from Amonkhet. It's 2 blue and a green. For an enchantment, at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, remove all flood counters from Bounty of Luxa. If no counters were removed this way, put a flood counter on Bounty of Luxa and draw a card. Otherwise, add a colorless, a green, and a blue to your mana pool.
So basically, you either draw a card or you ramp 3.
For 4 mana.
Yes.
And it takes an entire turn to kind of
To get the first effect.
Something.
Yep.
We also have Elemental Bond. That just says for 3 mana, whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. We have Mana Flare, which is great. Mystic Remora. Retreat to Kazandu, one of those retreats from the original Zendikar block. Retreat to Valkut. Rites of Flourishing, which is a 3-mana enchantment that kind of a group hug effect here.
Yep.
At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on his or her turn. 2 very good effects for this deck. Listeners of our show kind of know how we feel about group hug. So I'm sure
it's awesome. I can't wait.
I'm sure Dana has opinions in a little bit.
I do.
We also have Thassa, God of the Sea. Make something unblockable. That scry at your upkeep is super great. And there's a lot of blue pips in this deck, so she could possibly become a creature. Finally, we have Zendikar's Roil. 5 mana whenever a land ETBs. Make a 2/2 green elemental token.
All right. So, what do you guys think of these? Anything you don't like among this list?
Mana Flare.
Why don't you like Mana Flare, Chris?
Because I've fallen into this trap.
Okay.
Doubling mana is awesome, but when you double it for everyone, it is not so awesome.
And
I agree with that.
And you're not just doubling it for one person, you're doubling it for 3 or 4 people,
Yes.
or 2 or 3 people, depending on what the pod breakup is.
Yep. And honestly, his curve isn't like extremely high on the creature base or the other stuff, so there's no reason to need that doubled mana.
And if you were running a deck that had like some kind of a crazy amount of card draw or something, where you're like, well, I'm doubling everyone's mana, but the way this deck works, I'm going to constantly have 12 cards in hand, so I'm going to play them all, and it will get me further ahead. It won't be quite a parity effect. It'll be, but this isn't that deck, I don't think. I don't think you are drawing so many cards that you're going to spend the mana in a way nobody else can. I think you run the risk of helping everyone else win the game. And I think Rites of Flourishing, I think there's a little bit of that there as well. You're giving everyone an extra card and letting them play an extra land. And yes, you get to do that, but I don't think it helps this deck. enough to justify giving 3 cards away and 3 land drops away.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's in here for the simple fact of exploration is expensive.
It is. And burgeoning's still not cheap either. So it's maybe a budget-ish version of that same thing. But if I had a choice, I would absolutely run one of those 2 instead of this. Or the Team Ascendancy I mentioned before to give yourself haste and draw off the creatures.
Yeah.
I don't like Rights. I don't like Mana Flare here. And I don't know if Bounty Deluxe is good enough.
You're right, Dana. I don't think Bounty Deluxe does enough here. I think if you want to replace that, I think Hadana's Climb is a better substitute. That was the flip enchantment from Rivals of Ixalan. So
Yep.
the enchantment side is 1 green and a blue for a legendary enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if that creature has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, transform Hadana's Climb. Well, Omnath alone wants +1/+1 counters, so he should already have 3 on it when this hits, or maybe 2, and this is the 3rd one. But
Or another creature does.
Or another creature. But when it flips, it becomes Winged Temple of Orazca. It's a land. It can tap to add any color to your mana pool. And then for 1 green and a blue again, target creature you control gains flying and gets +X/+X, where X is its power. So that's just a way to get your commander damage in, giving Omnath flying and +5/+5 +10/+10, whatever his power is. Seems really good for essentially 3 mana.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have 2 more on here that I actually wasn't going to put in the list initially when I was doing with budget stuff. But since the budget's a little bit higher than I thought, the first is going to be Shared Animosity. It's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. I mean, there's times when that's just going to be like, hey, all my creatures get +8/+8.
Everybody dies.
And everyone's going to die. So that's one I would recommend if you can find a slot for it. I think it's around $10 now. The other one is Mana Echoes.
That's more than $10.
And that's like 30, I think, or closing in on 30.
We should probably check because the internet
I'll get yelled
loves
at
to
for
tell
being
us.
like, come on, coffers only cost 25. And I'm like, that's not at all true anymore.
I remember that.
It is 30. Good.
Is it
It's
30?
just
All
over
right.
30.
All right. So Mana Echoes is 2 red. Whenever a creature comes into play, you may add 1 to your mana pool for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. So again, like, if you're playing a tribal deck in red here and you're dropping your 5th creature there, and you just get 5 colorless mana. And I've got a couple mana sinks I'm going to suggest later on, but even if you don't have ridiculous mana sinks, a lot of times that's the difference between you being able to play like 1 creature for the turn and 4 creatures for the turn. Particularly because a lot of these have some nice, relatively high colorless mana costs. In this deck, I think those are both really good cards if you can pick them up.
I'm just going to add to the 3-drop slot because we need more 3-drops.
Okay, good. Because I'm gonna jump to the 5-drop after you.
All right.
Imprison of the Moon and Song of the Dryads. I think both of those in the enchantment slots need to be, especially seeing how you're in bad colors for good removal.
Yeah.
And those are just good removal in general.
And the removal that can keep them from replaying their commander too if you see troublesome commanders out there sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah. There
are decks when if you hit that Atali Primal Hunger or something with a Song of the Dryads, it's just that red player's like, well, I better top deck a Chaos Warp or my commander's gone all game.
Yeah.
I'll strip mine it all day.
I mean, I've seen you do that, or I've seen it done before.
So, as Adam said in his notes, this deck is kind of doing 2 things, Elementals and Landfall.
Yes.
Yep.
I definitely think you need to pick one. I get Omnath needs lands.
Yep.
But you're in green, you can build that into the deck without making it completely Landfall. I chose to kind of go more the tribal synergy because I'm working on a tribal humans deck right now for EDH. So the 2 that I think would be great in this deck, especially because 1 deals with elementals, would be Rite of the Raging Storm. It's 3 red. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they get a 5/1 elemental token that can't attack you. So you're forcing your opponents to either kill everybody or, skull clamp and draw a couple cards.
Do they have to attack?
It does not have to attack. But
see, this is my metagame on that. I just leave it for a blocker and then attack you with the rest of my creatures.
It gets exiled at the end of turn.
It goes away.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes away no matter what.
Okay.
But like if you're playing that Shared Animosity or the Mana Echoes,
You get a 5/1 with haste that is now
whatever.
Who knows
Yeah,
what.
and you may get a bunch of mana off that for free too. I guess
Yep.
it's at the beginning of your Is it the beginning of your
At
turn?
the beginning of your upkeep, you put a 5/1 elemental creature token named Lightning Rager onto the battlefield. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice this creature.
So any mana
it's a
you-
death trigger, actually.
Yeah, so the mana you got off of that would be during your upkeep. You'd have to utilize it at instant speed, but still, there are things that would use that. I think that would be a good one, too. I like that. I think both the retreats aren't good enough.
I think
Maybe the red one.
I think I like the red and the blue. I think the blue one should be in here, not the green one.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. I get the green one does counters, and that helps Omnath and all that fun stuff. But the red one, makes something not block,
Sure.
gives something +2/+0. +2/+0 is better than +1/+1.
Yes.
Granted, it's only till end of turn. There's a bunch of logistics there. I just like the blue one because it's either scry or you can tap something down.
Yeah. Okay.
My other 5-drop enchantment, and yes, it's a 5-drop, but Kindred Discovery.
Oh yeah.
three blue.
Yeah.
Enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Elemental.
I don't know how I missed that.
Whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield, it doesn't say non-token. So you're Lightning Rager. You're going to draw a card off of. Anything that makes tokens that you may have in this deck is going to make elemental tokens, is going to draw you cards.
And then you draw more cards when you swing.
And then when enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card.
Yeah.
So, and this deck is very light on card draw.
I mean, there's been like legitimate times when I look at my board state in my Talrand deck and I'm like, well, I have 4 Drakes out. I guess I can make 2 more this turn. Let's see what I top deck. And I top deck Kindred Discovery. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm going to draw 9 cards this turn.
Yep.
And it like that card turns the game around in that deck.
It does.
And it would probably do the same thing here. That's a good catch. I forgot about that one. That's a good catch.
And now I am going to drop back down to the 3-drop spot with Rhythm of the Wild.
Yeah.
Giving your stuff haste or +1/+1 seems really good in this deck.
And the beauty of Rhythm of the Wild is even if you're running like Team or Ascendancy
You can use both.
and you happen to have both out, it stacks because you would just use the is that Explorer?
No,
Riot?
Riot.
The Riot trigger on that. Yeah, that's a good call too. Okay, should we look at some sorceries here? There's 7 in this deck. There's a Cultivate, a Kadama's Reach, a Nissa's Pilgrimage, which I will read here briefly. Search your library for 2 basic forest cards, reveal those cards, and put 1 onto the battlefield tap, and the rest into your hand. Then shuffle your library. So it's a Kadama's Reach or Cultivate that only gets basic forests. However, it has spell mastery. So if there are 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, you instead put 2 forests in your hand. So it's just basically one more variant on, Cultivate or Kadama's Reach. Then we have Nissa's Renewal, which I will come back to.
Please do.
Rampant Growth, Scape Shift, and a Splendid Reclamation.
So essentially, every one of these sorceries has to do with lands.
Yes.
Okay.
Scape Shift is Scape Shift, so we what that does in this deck. It's landfall triggers, bring stuff back from your graveyard. The only thing I would say not from your graveyard, you sacrifice lands to go get ones from your library to put them into play to get the landfall triggers. I like Scape Shift. Is there enough landfall stuff in this deck, do you guys think, to really utilize that? I don't think it's bad, but I've seen it's a backbreaker in some landfall decks, and I can see how in this one it isn't at times.
I mean, I don't think it is backbreaking enough. I think between Omnath himself, Angry Omnath, which is the red-green one, and maybe like Roil Elemental, those are your 3 biggest, and Titania, I guess. Oh, she wants lands to go to the graveyard.
Yeah.
But that would work
You'll
with
sacrifice
Scape Shift.
them.
I don't think it's enough. Chris is looking at me like I'm wrong.
I mean, if you have that and Splendid Reclamation, obviously that feels pretty good.
Right.
Field of the Dead.
Yeah.
Risen Reef and Omnath, red-green Omnath together, you can pretty much draw your entire deck.
And then kill everybody.
And, probably should have mentioned during the lands, like, there's enough basics in this deck you probably could support a Valkud if you wanted to.
Oh, for sure.
So that would be an option here as well. But, yeah.
Especially with your Blood Moon.
Yeah.
Yes!
If you do make the change and put some of the dual type of lands in here, I would swap Rampant Growth for Nature's Lore at the exact same cost, because it goes and it'll get you a dual and it comes into play untapped. As it stands right now, without a bunch of duals, Rampant Growth is fine.
Yep.
Because it lets you pick one of the 3 to fix your colors, but if you have dual typed lands, then Nature's Lore will do that as well, untapped.
The same can be said for Farseek. It just comes in tapped.
Yeah. So Nissa's Renewal.
Oh, yes, let's please talk about this.
Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library, and you gain 7 life. So for 1 more mana, the Nissa's Renewal, you could cast Boundless Realms and go get every basic land, or at least the vast majority of the ones, and just put them all into play at once. I would be really...
Isn't Boundless Realms 10 mana, though?
Nope, it's 7.
Is it really? What am I thinking? It's 8 and double green.
The Great Hedge.
Primal Surge.
Yeah,
is
Primal
that as
Surge
well.
is 8 and 2 green.
So I would, I think I would... That Nissa's spell is not good enough, I don't think, for this deck.
I'm going to go the opposite way.
Okay.
I'm going to recommend one of my pet cards, which is Hour of Promise. For 4 and a green, go get 2 of any land and put them in the battlefield tapped.
One of which could be Valkut at some point if you need
Valkut
to.
or that Cavern of Souls,
Yep.
or if you do want to bump up your non-basics and maybe put like a Strip Miner, a Ghost Quarter, or even, Alchemist Refuge to let you flash stuff in. There are a bunch of stuff you could go get with this card that lets you get non-basic lands.
Yeah. I do think this doesn't do enough at 6 mana compared to either running something more efficient, like leaving in your Rampant Growth and adding Nature's Lore for 2 mana and just get your land, or spend 1 mana more on Boundless Realms and just dome everybody with 10 landfall triggers.
I mean, just cutting this for Nature's Lore or Farseek is going to drop that average CMC by probably like 0.05 points.
It'll let you drop something on turn 2.
Yeah.
Where there's not a ton of, like we said, 12 or 13 cards that were 2 drops. That'll help you out a lot there as well. One that is a cool card that you can play in these colors is Guided Passage. Basically, you pass it's 3 mana, so it's just 1 of each, and reveal the cards in your library. So basically, you hand your library to an opponent, and an opponent chooses from among them a creature card, a land card, and a non-creature, non-land card. And those cards go into your hand and you shuffle your library. So the reason you don't run that is because, you're like, well, I don't want to give away information, but if you're playing in a small group, everyone has the information already. It's kind of time-consuming sometimes for someone to dig through your library to find 3 cards, but I still think for 3 mana, you're gonna get the worst land card in your deck, so you'll get a redundant basic, which is still a landfall trigger. That's fine. You'll play that. You'll get the worst creature in your deck, and so that's I don't know what would you call the worst creature in this deck right now?
Flamekin Harbinger.
Yeah, maybe. Like Smoke Braider, maybe Slither Muse, but it's still a card to hand. Ingot Chewer. Who knows? They'll give you something. Leafkin Druid, whatever. But they're still going to give you a creature, and then they'll give you the worst of something else, whether it's a Horn of Greed, or it wouldn't be that, like a Felwar Stone or something. For 3 mana to get an artifact to land in a creature, I think there's almost no situation where that isn't good value. And the better you tweak your deck, the better Guided Passage gets, because they have less and less choices. Like if I had a team or deck that was 3 years old and I really tightened the screws on it so it was tight, and you're like, well, you're going to give me a basic, and my worst creature, my worst something else are still going to be things you don't want to give me for the 3 mana cost. So that's just a spell that... Plus people will be like, what the hell is that? What is this card? Because it's old too, and it's also relatively cheap, it's only a couple bucks. So that's what I would like to see in this deck, just because you can run it, so why not?
Exactly. I want to see Urban Evolution. Because I'm still on
You're trying to find a place where that works.
Yeah, well, you need more card draw in this deck. You
do in general, yeah.
So draw 3 cards, and then you may play an additional land this turn for 5 mana and sorcery speed. Draw 3 cards is huge. Get to play an additional land, which triggers any of your landfall things. Just in general, it does everything that the deck was looking for.
It's adding a landfall trigger onto a Harmonize.
Yes.
And we all like Harmonize for one more mana.
I'm going to one-up you, in my opinion. I'm going to go with Rishkar's Expertise.
Oh, that's on here too.
Okay,
that's just a no-brainer.
Sure. Because, like Dana said, most of his cards are in that 3-drop slot. You're always going to be able to cast something for free.
Yeah.
Yep.
That seems so good.
And there are times it'll draw you 24 cards off some stupid creature you haven't played.
Right.
I had one more here. We've mentioned this in probably every green deck that we've talked about that wasn't running Overwhelming Stampede, but like if you're talking about having a tough time to win games, it's going to win you a game. You will draw that card and you'll win the game. Unless it was Wrath of God pass the turn to you and you top deck Overwhelming Stampede, but like with the exception of that, if you have any kind of board state with this deck, you are probably just going to, or at least kill one or two people. Like worst case, you'll kill one or two people. It's not exciting. We're not giving you, this isn't a guided passage kind of card where you probably haven't heard of it, and it's a cool card for this deck. It's obvious, but like sometimes you just need to kill people.
Yeah.
And that will do it consistently, really, really often in this deck.
I do think, granted, I know this is a creature-heavy deck. It's meant to kill, like, win with beats. There's no wraths in this deck, whether it's a Cyclonic Rift or a Blasphemous Act. Even just adding Blasphemous Act, it's never going to cost 9 mana.
No. I would run Blasphemous Act. Quite honestly, at this point, I think if you are playing red, I can't imagine a red deck where I don't run Blasphemous Act. Even if I'm playing, like...
5 colors.
I don't play it in Alesha.
What? You are your history's greatest monster, Chris.
I'm also playing I'm in black and white, so I have like Damnation and Wrath of God.
But I would still run it over Damnation and Wrath of God just because it's always going to be 1 mana.
But I am going to side with Chris on this. There are times when that 13 damage doesn't kill the thing you want to kill. Where Wrath and Damnation do that.
But they can't be regenerated.
You're 100% correct. But I feel like at least when I play for the most part, I feel like it's worth that risk to cast it for 1 mana and then rebuild immediately.
Because he's probably also holding Path and Swords and Reality Shift in his hand, so it's fine.
up my sleeve, but same thing.
I say this all the time. I just put a copy of Rift behind every card in every one of my decks. I'm not even playing blue, but Cyclonic Rift.
Just in case.
Why the double sleeve decks don't fit in your boulders quite right, but mine go in just perfect.
I did have somebody recently, I can't remember what game, where it was, but we mentioned on the last show the 1-drop artifacts I mentioned. I think it was Wayfarer's Bauble, and it was like someone's like, what are the odds of you drawing that? You've drawn it 3 games in a row, and I'm like, it was 3 different decks. I just haven't all my decks. It wasn't that I keep drawing it, it's just that it's in every one of my decks. Anyway, okay, well, hey, speaking of artifacts, we jump over to artifacts and take a look at what's here?
Let's do it.
There's 12 of them, Max. Yeah,
so we have Altar of Dementia, Amulet of Vigor, Chromatic Lantern, Commander's Sphere, Door of Destinies, Felwar Stone, Horn of Greed, Soul Ring, Sword of the Animist, Talisman of Creativity, Talisman of Curiosity, and Teamer Banner. I was about to say Batter, but I don't know
That's
why.
what I thought you were going to say.
And now that I just see Banner, I just want to put a Hulk on there and be like, yeah, I'm Bruce Banner.
So anything here you like or dislike?
I dislike a lot of this stuff. I don't understand why Amulet of Vigor is in this deck when the only land you have that comes in tapped is naturally, not off of a search or anything, is Frontier Bivouac.
And I bet you it's in here because all the tutor cards.
Tutors, yes. I understand that. If you make some of those swaps like we recommended, a lot of those bring it in untapped.
Yes.
Now, if you were running more duels like shocks, then it's perfect. You can put the shock in, untap, or tapped, and it untaps. I don't like the banners.
Well, I'll lump this all together and say, here's the note. Maybe you are playing in a meta with, you mentioned some of the decks, and there's red in those decks. Maybe you see a ton of mass artifact removal. Maybe your friend who plays the Zedru deck runs Vandal Blast and Shattering Spree and By Force and I can't even think, Shatter Storm, and like maybe that person's like, I'm just going to kill artifacts or something. Yep. If that's the, or not that, I'm sorry, I did that backwards. Maybe they're just running a bunch of land removal stuff. If that's the case, then I get why you're running these rocks. If they're not doing that, though, in a landfall deck, why are you running talismans at all when you could just run, like we mentioned before, there's only the Rampant Growth in here, when you could run Farseek and Nature's Lore, take out 2 of those, put those 2 in. Number 1, they're tougher to remove unless someone's running a lot of mass land destruction. And number 2, they get you the landfall triggers this deck cares about. They get Omnath up there even faster. You know, I know you want to run elementals, but like the difference between Felwar Stone and Steve, Sakura Tribe Elder, which you can just crack to go get a land, it's not going to be out anyway.
Right.
So why not run Steve, who will get you the landfall trigger as well, and it won't die to the artifact removal stuff.
Because it's not an elemental, Dana.
And I get that. Like, I'm
You're the purist.
I absolutely am. But there's also enough other things. There's a few creatures in here who aren't elementals.
Very true.
So, and if you just don't want it in play, it's not going to be like, just treat it like a sorcery you're going to play it and crack it immediately anyway.
Yeah, if any of the mana rocks that I would run, I like the Chromatic Lantern, the Commander Sphere. Then you can start thinking about like a Darksteel Ingot or a Manolith.
Yeah,
I know you hate that
Manolith,
card.
yeah.
I know you hate that card, Dana. It's not a jab at you with that, but something that creates any of the colors because you're in 3 colors.
Sure.
You don't need the other ones that are only creating, one of each one, and then they ping you.
So yeah, I would look to replace several of those rocks with just things that go get you land, especially in this deck. Anything else?
I like Door of Destinies, especially if you're the only elemental
Yep.
deck in your meta. That's great. I think there are better. I think Vanquisher's Banner is just better because you choose the creature type. It's 5 mana. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. But whenever you cast a creature card of that type, you draw a card. And again, this deck does not have a lot of draw in it. And I don't mind spending 5 mana in a deck with green in it, where you could probably play another card this turn to replace itself.
Yep. The ones that I was really thinking about, because I'm on the same route with you, Danny. You don't need quite as many mana racks because you're more land base. You need Greaves, Boots, Whisper Silk Cloak, whatever, because your biggest card draw engine in the deck as of right now is Omnath.
Yes.
So the more ways that you can
Omnath.
protect him, the better.
I would really want Greaves and Boots, those two for sure, in this deck to protect Omnath.
I was thinking Whisper Silk, just for a simple fact of he's looking for ways to get in.
That helps.
And the unblockable could work too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you don't really target him with any of your stuff, so the Shroud isn't a big deal like it sometimes is in some decks. That's a good call. All right. Let's jump over maybe. And Chris, what's the one Planeswalker in this deck?
It's a Nissa. Nissa World Awaker. 5 mana. I do believe this was, the card version that he has on here, I'm not sure what it is, but I do believe this is M15 when she was
I
printed.
think so, yeah.
This is the
Dual deck, I think.
No, it's the Archenemy returned
Against
Nicol
Bolas.
Bolas Archenemy card.
Yep, I'm not sure. So 3 colorless, double green, 3 loyalty when she comes into play. Target land you control becomes a 4/4 elemental creature with trample. It's still land. That is a +1. Her other +1 is untap up to 4 target forests.
So her -7, I'm going to help Chris out here. It says search your library for any number of basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Those lands become 4/4 elemental creatures with trample. They're still lands.
What do you think of that, Walker?
I can think of a better 5 mana one.
So can I. My question is, do they enter and then become the elementals, or do they enter as elementals? That would be my question.
How is it worded?
They enter the battlefield tapped. Those lands become 4/4 elementals.
So they wouldn't get an ETB as elemental.
Not that really matters for Omnath. It would matter because he wants a lot of elementals.
Yeah.
I think the 5 mana Nissa Chris is thinking is still a better fit for this deck.
Nissa Vital Force?
Yes.
Yeah.
Particularly because you only need to keep her alive 1 turn to get that ult. She comes into play at 5. The crucial parts here, if she comes away at 5 loyalty and at -6, you get an emblem with whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. It's also a May effect, which is
Huge.
can make a difference.
If you ever choose not to draw, then I think you're in the situation in the game where you're probably just losing anyways.
And her +1, which you usually would do to get her there, is untap target land you control until your next turn. It becomes a 5/5 elemental creature with haste, and it's still a land.
So worst case, she's a 4 mana Nissa. I mean, this is the Garruk complex here. It's a 4 mana Planeswalker. You untap 2 lands. It's a 2 mana Planeswalker.
Right. So she becomes a 4 mana Planeswalker, basically, and you have another elemental out to synergize with whatever elemental shenanigans you have going on.
Yeah.
If I was going to run one Planeswalker, it would be Nissa Vital Force over Nissa that's in this deck right now.
Same
That's me.
here.
I do really like Flip Nissa, though. She's just card after my heart.
Sure. And if you were going to focus more on the go wide elemental stuff, there's a couple of Chandras that do pretty good stuff with elementals as well.
Flamecaller.
Yeah.
The ability to wheel your hand if you have to.
Okay. What is next? Some creatures here? Is that where we're
I
at?
think that is the last place we're at.
All right.
The raw-rars of the deck.
28 creatures. You want to give them to us here, Max?
Oh, okay. Was not prepared.
Gotcha. Got him.
Animar Soul of Elements, Avatar Growth, Avenger Zendikar, Bane of Progress, Birds of Paradise, not an elemental, Embodiment of Spring, Flamekin Harbinger, Forgotten Ancient, Green Warden of Marasa, Incandescent Soulstoke, Ingot Chewer, Leafkin Druid, Liege of the Tangle, Living Twister, Maelstrom Wanderer, Minanden Wildborn, not an elemental. Oh, good, it isn't. It turns Zendikar, you never know.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Nova Chaser, Omnath Locus of Rage, Risen Reef, Royal Elemental, Slithermuse, Smoke Braider, that's a cool name, Soul of the Harvest, Soulbright Flamekin, Spawnwraith, Titania Protector of Argoth, Tornado Elemental, and Vortex Elemental.
Okay, so quick aside here before we get into this, because I've skipped over these under sorceries, and then I caught it when we went to the next category, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to quick mention these, and I forgot it again, and I've gotten distracted 4 times.
Oh, good, I have a land too.
Okay. These two, if you are going to go with the make a bunch of elementals so you can make Omnath disgusting and get the big damage triggers, Firecat Blitz.
Oh, yeah.
And I think people miss this because on the card it just says cats. They're elemental cats. And it comes into play. It's 2 mana and X, and you create X red elemental cat creature tokens with haste, and exile at the end of the next end step. But like if you can drop that and then put in make a ton of mana off them if you have echoes or something out, or just you've got a ton of mana in this deck anyway from landfall triggers, and then drop Omnath after you've just made 9 elementals and the ones you already had in play, you can just kill somebody. And similarly, Tempt with Vengeance also makes elementals. The risk with Tempt is someone else takes the Tempt and makes a bunch of, you don't care, and they make a bunch of elementals, then you get the elementals, and then you drop Omnath.
They will fall for that once.
Well, but
they will not fall for it again.
You have some political options there. If you say, I'm going to make 9 elementals and cast Omnath, if you give me 9, I'm going to kill Steve across the table who's looking really scary. And then someone's like, oh, I might take that Tempt just to get rid of Steve, because if Steve's going to kill us next turn anyway, like you can actually, in this particular deck, make some good deals, particularly because Omnath can come down and just dome somebody.
Now, if that's your buddy Dave, who's broken your allegiances before, don't
you
trust
trust him, right? Like if they're playing a Tajik deck or something, you wouldn't trust him.
I feel attacked by that comment. Extremely, because my father's name is Dave.
Okay, so before we get back to the creatures, Max, you had a land quick. You forgot.
Yeah. Uno momento. I forgot it again.
Por favor.
Path of Ancestry.
Oh yeah. An elemental deck would make sense.
Just name elemental. It works.
Yep. All right. So let's look at these creatures here. You went over all of them. Are there any that you like or dislike or want to add here, Max?
I don't like Birds of Paradise in this deck.
I don't think it's necessary.
I don't either. I'd put another land in this deck. If you really want to go the landfall route, put a non-basic land.
I mean, they put Steve in that slot.
Or Wood Elves or something.
Right, yes.
I'm going to add to the 3 mana slot again.
All right.
Woohoo!
With a wonderful elemental called Fertilid.
Yeah.
So Fertilid's 2 colorless and a green. For a 0/0 creature, comes into play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. For 1 colorless and a green, remove a +1/+1 counter from Fertilid. Target player searches their library for a basic land card, puts it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffles their library. The cool thing about this is with the Omnath, whenever you get that trigger to put counters on, you can put counters back on Fertilid and keep tutoring up lands.
Yep. I am going to suggest an elemental here, and that would be Rubble Hulk. And it is a card out of, I think it was in Gatecrash. It is 6 mana for red-green for a star. Rubble Hulk's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control, which, okay, that's, that seems unexciting.
But wait, there's more.
Blood Rush for 3 mana, 1 red-green, discard Rubble Hulk. Target attacking creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of the lands you control.
I have seen you nuke someone with this card before. I kill people with this
card, in Den deck, which is a landfall deck, regularly, because you just attack, they're like, oh, no blocks. Boom, this creature's got +12/+12. If it's your commander, in this case, like in Mina and Den, I kill people with commander damage with it, and they're a 4/4. In this case, Omnath's going to pretty frequently be like a 10 or a 12, and someone might be like, well, I can take 1 shot. Nope, you can't. You just died. And in a deck that also has, a few ways to sacrifice, if you happen to be playing things like Momentous Fall or Life's Legacy or something, it's just that much better because then you sacrifice the creature, draw all the cards in the world. But anyway, Rubble Hulk, I think in an elemental deck is one I would absolutely run. That it's not bad if you cast it, but the Blood Rush thing, as a combat trick, again, is a way to close out a game.
Yep. I have another one called Creeping Trailblazer. This is a new card out of M20. 1 red, 1 green for an elemental. Other elementals you control get +1/+0. Now, for 2 colorless, 1 red, 1 green, Creeping Trailblazer gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each elemental you control.
Yeah.
And it is a base 2/2.
I think if you are gonna go wide with elementals route, and I agree with what Max said earlier. I think you want to lean heavily into one or the other. You want to pick one.
Yep.
I don't know if that's as good if you're going the landfall route, but if you're going with the elemental route, which I think he acted like he wanted to a little bit, I would run that for sure.
Okay. I have a couple. I'm not a big fan of Living Twister.
No?
So Living Twister is 2 red and a green for a 2/5 elemental. It has 2 activated abilities. The first one is 1 and a red, discard a land card. Living Twister deals 2 damage to any target. And then the other ability is a green, return tapped land you control to its owner's hand. So I can understand you cast Cultivate for 3 mana, you put a land into play tapped, and then you pay the green to bring it to your hand, and you play it again to get that second landfall trigger.
Sure. Yep.
I think that's kind of a waste of mana.
I think there are better ways you can
Yes,
accomplish.
there are better ways to do that.
You can accomplish a lot of landfall triggers in the stack.
There are 2 other elementals that I think would do way better in this deck. The first being Moltani, Yavamaya's avatar from Dominaria. 4 green for a legendary creature elemental avatar. It has reach and trample, and it gets +1/+1 for each land you control in each land you control and each land in your graveyard. So that gets huge. It kills us in Reki, it kills us in Mina and Den. We all have the trauma from it. It also has 1 and a green. Return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand, and then return Moltani to the graveyard to your hand. So it's recursion.
Yep.
On the off chance you can't cast Omnath for the 6th time in the game.
And it's recursion that also gets you extra landfall triggers if you need them.
Right.
Yeah, Moltani has been really, really good, and he has reach, I believe, correct?
Yes.
And this is a deck that doesn't have a lot of defense against flyers, and I think that's one way to get some of that, for sure. I like Moltani a lot, and I think he'd be a good fit for this deck.
The other one being a little higher on the CMC end of the scale. It's at 3 and triple green. But we talked about this earlier, I think, either in this show or last week's Monday show. Vigor.
Yeah.
It does your +1/+1 counters. It protects Omnath. It makes Omnath bigger. Boom. Everybody's dead.
Yep.
I do like a wonderful elemental called Creeper Hulk.
Creeper Hulk. I can't
So
think what
3
that is.
colorless, double green for a 5/5 with trample. For 1 colorless and a green, until end of turn, target creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 and gains trample. Now this, all it's doing is changing the base power and toughness. That doesn't include the counters. So the counters add on top of that.
Yes.
Plus
Okay.
you're giving trample for 2 mana.
Nice. Was there any more entries you guys wanted to
The
see? show up
greatest
here?
elemental ever printed, called Muldrifter. Come on,
I thought
guys.
about that. I was surprised that was, yeah, and this is a deck that could use some draw.
Well, it's also evasion.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't evoke it, so for 4 colorless and a blue, you get a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. Now it has a wonderful ability called Evoke. For 2 colorless and a blue, you may cast a spell for the Evoke cost. Immediately upon casting, it gets discarded, and then but you still draw the 2 cards.
Yep. I think Thornwing sometimes can be a fun
Yeah.
card, and if you're playing elementals, I would have a tough time not maybe finding a slot for Thornwing just because it's so tough to find slots for Thornwing in the deck so often. Like, it's a pretty sweet card. I would not object to finding room for that either. As with all the Lings, it has 4 activated abilities. In this case, you can give it Trample. You can give it Haste. It's going to be 5 activated abilities. You can give it Indestructible, and then you can do the +1, -1, or the -1, +1. All for 1 mana. That's a solid elemental you could run here. So let's move to some final thoughts on the deck here.
Okay. I guess I'll start. I think, like we said earlier in the show, this deck needs to go one of 2 ways.
Yes.
It needs to either go elemental and just, get incremental value off of Omnath's landfall, pseudo landfall ability.
Because you're going to get landfall stuff off on
Just by playing the game.
Yes.
Or you just go the landfall route, which means this deck would look 100% different. You're not going to play 90% of these elemental creatures. You'll probably play Roil, Elemental, and a couple other ones that actually say landfall on them. But I truly think you should stick with the elemental route because you are in a newer meta. Creature decks are fun. I love playing creature decks.
Particularly elementals are fun.
Right. So my kind of final thought is if you kind of want to keep the deck where it's headed, but still make it maybe that next power level up, take it from a 6 to a 7, think about adding ways to abuse Omnath's ETB ability. So add a Conjurer's Closet, add a Ghostly Flicker.
Yeah.
Just so you can make a bunch of tokens, or you have 4 or 5 elementals out, you cast Omnath, and then you conjure Closet, and you do it more.
So, side note.
Max is a scumbag.
Yes.
And go buy my t-shirt. Oh, that's it. Yay!
Wow. You got there.
Oh.
Didn't do it on Monday.
I do really love this deck, but I want you guys' personal opinions. And any of you listeners who have had us do deck techs, I want you guys' opinions as well.
And you can
Have
DM
we made
Squish.
your meta hate you yet? I really want to know this.
Well, I don't hate Cam for comboing out on us in Vegas because you, with his Eldrazi deck, his blue-white Eldrazi deck.
And we generally didn't, like, we mentioned,
He brought us candy, though, so I might be biased.
Oh, it's good Canadian candy, too. we didn't mention, like, Blood Moon and Back to Basics, but we weren't like, you have to run Blood, like, we weren't, usually we don't recommend things that probably tick people off too badly.
Yep. No, overall, I really enjoy this deck, and I am 100% with Max. You got to choose one way or the other. You can still leave in your ramp stuff to trigger Omnath and everything.
Yeah.
You're in green, you
But
have
the
to.
cards that actually say landfall that don't actually benefit you, I don't think are worth it.
So how it tends to work, and I have a landfall deck in red and green, the mix of creatures and effects that care about lands coming into play are much different than running elementals. And I think if you want elementals and landfall stuff, I think you have a weaker version of the deck because to get the good landfall effects, you need to get out of elementals quite a ways. I think if you want to do elemental stuff, and that's what Omnath wants, he wants elementals when he comes into play. I think you need to lean into that a little bit more and get rid of the things like retreats that are landfall and put things that deal with elementals in the deck. And I think a go wide elemental deck is the best version of this, and it probably also runs the most interesting cards.
Yeah, because you can go digging deep.
Yeah. Firecraft Blitz is a fun card to cast against people. Temple Vengeance is a fun card. Like, there's a lot of fun elemental cards that you still get landfall triggers. You still do plenty of landfall stuff, but I agree that's the direction I would probably take it to. And then you have things like, hey, I'm going to run Flamekin Village or something. It's going to come into play untapped because of elementals in your hand, and it gives you haste. Like, there's some decent synergy cards too that we didn't go into too much depth, but that's where I would probably take this as well.
Agreed. Yeah, because as I'm thinking about it, when your deck is split, a good example of this is going to be you have all these ramp cards in your hand and no landfall triggers. All you have is elementals. Or you have all these landfall things, but no ramp cards.
Or you want to hold on to your ramp spells until the stuff is in play to get the landfall triggers, and then you wind up doing nothing for the first few turns because you're like, I don't want to cast this Nature's Lore right now when I could wait till turn 4, cast this thing, and then on turn 5, cast Nature's Lore and get the landfall trigger.
Yep.
Like, you wind up kind of fighting against yourself to get the timing right. Years ago, I had built a Raikou of Two Reflections deck that was supposed to run creatures that came into play and made tokens. So, like, Goblin War Marshal comes into play and makes goblins. The plan was that I would make a copy of that with Raikou and double up on the tokens that came into play. Except for then I always wanted to, like, not cast anything until Raikou was out. And some of that's yourself and you being disciplined and, like, I can't just always wait. But it's also frustrating to fight against your deck's timing sometimes, too. So I agree with both of you guys there. Well, thank you very much, Adam, for giving us this deck to take a look at. And I hope this was helpful to you. And thank you very much for supporting us on Patreon. That is a big deal. It does mean a lot.
Yeah, and not just thank you to Adam, but thanks to all of our Patreon supporters,
for sure.
all of our listeners, everybody who interacts with us on Facebook, Twitter, in our Slack. We appreciate everybody just contributing to our show and just chatting with us.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big deal. It makes us a lot of fun. So thank you all very much.
And just remember, everyone, I want to hear about how we have changed your meta against you.
That's good.
I am curious about it.
I am too. All right. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. Our show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max. You can find Chris at a Wise Squishy 1. We'll be back on Monday with a live brew deck. We're going to do Sir Gwyn the Knighted.
Oh, I thought we were doing Shaloon.
Shulun. No, we're doing Sir Gwyn. All right. I did tell Dana we would not do Shulun.
All right, so we're doing Sir Gwyn on Monday. We'll give that away to a Patreon supporter. We will be back then. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.